Our first session of the day is about how to use your voice as an advocate for children and how to use your voice as a team. We will begin with Freebird Mckinney, the 2018 North Carolina Teacher of the Year from Williams High in the Alamance-Burlington school system, and Julie Pittman, the 2018 Western North Carolina Teacher of the Year from RS Central High in Rutherford County Schools. Both of them have been touring the state this past 6 months to talk about important topics, including child nutrition. In fact, this fall, Julie was recognized with the Friend of Child Nutrition Award by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Freebird and Julie will be followed by Tabari Wallace and the 2018 North Carolina Principal of the Year from West Craven High School, and Lauren Wayand, the School Nutrition Director for Craven County Schools. And we've been to visit them, and they have an amazing thing going on down there. It's really something. The team formed by Tabari and Lauren, and the benefits for children that have come from it are an inspiring model for all principals and nutrition directors. No Kid Hungry NC is proud to be a co-sponsor of the North Carolina Teacher of the Year and Principal of the Year awards. And we are thrilled to have teachers and principals who care so deeply about child nutrition. So please join me in welcoming Freebird and Julie.
Good morning. How's everybody doing today? So I am not a singer-songwriter. I always wanted to be one. In fact, growing up, one of my nicknames was Freebird the Rock Star Without a Band, because I could not play any instruments and I couldn't sing, but my friend said that I could be like a good front man. So I'm going to kind of start with that today, because I do actually want to tell you a story about a song. And I want to start off with going back to my childhood in first grade. I went to Irwin Open School in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's right off I-77, if you know that area well, right in front of the graveyard. So we had this graveyard behind us. In first grade, I was the lead in the play, the school play. And I loved it. I loved being up on stage. I loved the presence up there. I loved working with a group of kids to put on a production. But something happened when I was 9 years old, and my father left us. And it put us in a really bad position. And I wanted to talk about the power of voice in this circumstance, because for the first time in my life, I realized that I was very different than the other kids. And it was made apparent when I got a little card and I went to a different school lunch line. All right, and I couldn't quite figure it out at first. I was like, why do I need this little card? And I go on this side. The rest of my friends go over here. And I had a teacher named Miss Velasquez. And Miss Velasquez is one of the most powerful voices in my life. And I wanted to briefly share her voice with me before I introduce my good friend and colleague. Because what Miss Velasquez did was two things. She pulled me aside one day and she said, don't allow this to dictate you and your voice. Because she remembered me from the first grade. And she realized that I had changed. I was not the same kid that I was during that first grade. At this point, I'm in fourth grade. All right? And so I don't know if she did it for me, okay? But she put on this activity the first 3 weeks of school where we as a class had to perform We Are the World before we could go to recess. All right? And at first, you can imagine a group of fourth graders trying to figure out, like, how does this actually work? All right? So the first time it was miserable. We failed, and she'd be like, go on out to recess. We'll try it again tomorrow. All right? And then slowly, we began to realize that our individual voices could work together to do something powerful, to actually sing this song to Miss Velasquez, to where she would look at us a little differently and not wave her hand at us and say, go on out to recess. All right? So we started to basically give each other these roles. You're Kenny Rogers, you're Michael Jackson, you're Cyndi Lauper. All right? And then one by one, we get up there and we sing our parts. I am not going to do it, okay? What Miss Velasquez did is she took a group of broken kids way before we knew about ACEs, way before we knew about trauma-informed schools, or at least called them those things, because Miss Velasquez could read her kids. She knew what we needed. She knew exactly what she knew, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if she had studied or if she just knew it intrinsically, but she knew exactly what we needed. We needed to be fed and then we needed to be loved, and then we needed somehow to gain some sense of accomplishment and prestige. And she did that by allowing us to collectively use our voices and sing We Are the World. And we eventually did it, and it was a beautiful thing. And when we finally did it, you saw Miss Velasquez just kind of sit back and realize that she had taken this group of kids and give them their voices. Now I want to fast forward a little bit, because I think the importance of what we want to do today is we want to hear a collection of voices throughout this room. And that's been one of the humbling experiences that I've had as being the Borough's Welcome Teacher of the Year, traveling across the state. And this is a very special group to me, because this is the 2018-2019 Regional Teachers of the Year. All right? And I quickly realized that this collection of 9 people taught me one valuable lesson, and that one valuable lesson is I am not the Teacher of the Year. Like, I was named the Teacher of the Year, but all of these teachers are the Teachers of the Year. And each one of them has an individual voice, and when we collectively use those voices, it's much more powerful. And as we sat down at Ocracoke, at NCAT, and built out a platform, we quickly realized that each one of us had a unique talent, had a unique perspective and way to use our voice. And one of the most important realizations that I had is about my good friend and colleague, Julie Paige Pittman. And fast forward one more time. We quickly realized that each one of our individual stories becomes our collective story. And we have formed a friendship and a partnership, and you're going to hear from our other good friend, Tabari Wallace, as well. And it really started with No Kid Hungry. Because what happened is Andrew emailed me, and as state teacher there, he said, hey, we would love for you to come and participate with No Kid Hungry in the breakfast. Well, my friendship that we had developed with Julie made me quickly realize, like, I am honored to come to that breakfast, but there is a passionate and dedicated educator who is in the western region of this state who I believe's voice would represent our voice a whole lot stronger. And so we talked, and Julie came that day, and if anybody was in that room back in August of 2018, then you'll remember how powerful her voice is and how powerful her story is in regards to what we're fighting for on a daily basis for our students and serving their needs. So without further ado, it is my honor and my privilege to introduce my good friend and colleague, Julie Paige Pittman, the 2018-2019 Western Regional Teacher of the Year.
So I'm going to, well, thank you for those kind words. You nearly brought me to tears, which I don't like to do before I speak in front of a room. So what I'd like to ask you to do is reach into the center if you haven't pulled out your pen and phone cleaner, which is awesome. I didn't realize that. And open your notebook or on a piece of paper, and I want you to draw parallel lines, just your definition of parallel lines, because now I'm an English teacher and I tell stories, and I struggle with math, but one of the things that I've always known is an absolute that parallel lines don't intersect. So draw those lines, and we're going to look at what that is. I know if you know that it doesn't matter. Your choice. So look at those parallel lines. My math teacher taught me that in parallel lines, they never intersect on a plane. But today, you are going to be challenged to change the way that you think about a lot of things. And one of those things is parallel lines. But the other thing that you're going to be challenged on is how you use your voice and how we can use our voices. So we'll come back to that in just a minute. It's our little brain tease right there, and we'll come back to it. As the Western Region Teacher of the Year, one of the great things that I get to do is to travel around Western North Carolina and really the state and talk about the amazing things that are happening all across this state in schools and in classrooms and in communities, and especially what's happening in my district in Rutherford County schools, which I love. One of the things, the sad things in our district is that we have a high rate of poverty. And in our public school system, we average about 75% of our students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. Now, that's a sad state of affairs. At my school, it's not quite as high. At other schools, it's a little bit higher, but overall as a district, 75%. So our school board decided that we could apply for our CEP grant and either get free breakfast and lunch for students at certain schools, or some free breakfast and or lunch for students at other schools, or we could apply as a district and get it for all students. And so my school board used their voice to go all in. And they believed what my mantra has become this year, that it is important to feed the kids. So I want you to say that with me. Feed the kids. And you'll come back to that all throughout the day, because one thing is important and one thing comes down to why we are all here, and that is that we believe that it is important that no kid in North Carolina goes hungry, and that we will, with our collective voices, feed the kids. Okay, so one of the things that you have to understand about feeding the kids is that it is not just about their body. As an educator, I know that it is my responsibility to feed the kids, feed their minds, feed their bodies, and feed their souls. So mind, body, and soul. The thing that pulls those things together is the body. If the body is not fed, the mind cannot be, and neither can the soul. It is important to start with the body. So I'm going to take you back and tell you a little bit about my story. So this is me at 5 years old. I was in an elementary school in Berlin, Maryland, right out of Ocean City, Maryland, if you're familiar with the Eastern Shore. A great place to grow up. But I got in trouble in the first grade every day. I got in trouble for daydreaming, and in 1978, unlike 2019, in 1978, a lot of teachers did not have the equipment to be able to deal with students who didn't sit down and get their work done, even if they were 5 years old in a first grade classroom. So I got the opportunity to stay inside at recess every day and get my work done, because my teacher said I was going to be that kid who failed if I didn't. And at 5 years old, that became very clear, because at recess is where we got snack, and so I didn't get snack. My teacher knew my name and knew that I was not doing my work and knew that I was going to be that kid. My teacher knew my name, but she did not know my story. She did not sit down and ask what was going on and why I was daydreaming. She did not sit down and try to dig in a little bit deeper and try to refocus what I was doing. She was trying to feed my mind, but she didn't know that my soul was broken, and on many days, so was my body. Because what my teacher did not know was at 5 years old, I had witnessed my father try to murder my mother. What she did not know was that at 5 years old, there were times where my mother and my baby sister and I were locked out of the house. She did not know that at 5 years old, there were many nights, because my father could not hold down a job, that we did not have food because my mother was the sole provider in that house and was a public school teacher. She did not know that my body was broken, that my soul was broken, and so she could not feed my mind. So several years later, well, a few years later, my mom was able to get us out of that situation, and we moved to North Carolina. And I think the next slide. Yep. We moved to North Carolina. And in North Carolina today, as you know, there are 1.5 million students. And out of those 1.5 million students, almost 25% of them live in poverty. And in my district, that's a little bit higher percentage than that, but 25% in North Carolina. And then out of those 1.5 million students, 35% of those students experience some form of trauma before kindergarten, like I did. And out of those 1.5 million students, 1 in 5 of those students lives with some form of food insecurity. Now, in the United States, I believe it is 1 out of 6 students. So 1 out of 5 students. That's a significant increase of students in North Carolina. 300,000 students in North Carolina on a daily basis live with food insecurity. Freebird talked about ACEs. If you don't know what ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. And there are a variety of things that students can experience as children that can prohibit them from actually growing into the adults and the productive humans that they were born to be. Could be physical abuse, or a parent is in jail, or food insecurity. It could be suicide or death in their family. They might have parental substance abuse. But ACEs are things that affect our students. And they come to class and they have not chosen that path. That is the path that they were born into. But we as teachers and as a as a teacher I can speak, I'm charged with having to look out for those students, with having to try to figure out what's going on with them. I'm charged with having to make sure that there are safety nets for them in the school, that they have counseling, that they are fed. I'm charged with having to look to make sure that they are getting all that they need. And then on top of that, I'm also charged to teach. But I can't do that, and if you go to the next slide, I can't do that unless they are having all of their base needs met. So this is, Freebird mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now that top level, that blue level, that self-actualization, that's actually that's my job description. My job description is to help students through education self-actualize, to become who they were supposed to be, but they can't get to that unless all those other levels are met. And my school, and I know Freebird School and several other schools do a great job of dealing with all of those things underneath. Because at my school, as I said before, we feed all of our kids, regardless of their socioeconomic background. When I was 5 years old and my mom got us back to North Carolina and we were living on a teacher's salary, actually we moved in April, and we had several months where my mom didn't have a job. So, you know, teachers get paid in September. So April to September, that's a long time to go on 1 month's salary with 2 kids in a new state. So there were several days where I had to go to school and I got to go in that free lunch line. And my mom, as a school teacher, would know how difficult it would be for me to actually face my friends who didn't have to do that. The stigma of having to go through the free lunch line when she couldn't provide for me, it broke her heart. Those are the needs that my school is making for my students, and schools all across the state are making for their students to make sure that they are fed, because it is important that before we can feed those minds, we have to feed their bodies. We have to feed the kids. So if you go, okay, so daydreaming. I forgot I put this up here. Daydreaming, right? A short-term detachment from your immediate surroundings where contact with reality is blurred and often replaced with happy thoughts. So I like, as an English teacher, I like to analyze each word. Diction is important. Word choice is important. The replaced with happy thoughts makes me think, what was not happy? And in my situation, what was not happy was I didn't know if I was going to come home and have a parent that was still alive. I didn't know if I was going to come home and have food on the table. And then when we actually got to a safety place, I didn't know if I was going to be able to go to school and have enough money to buy lunch. Those were my unhappy thoughts. But luckily, if you'll go to the next slide, I was able to, at that age, have a great first grade teacher, Miss Vicki Temple. And Miss Vicki Temple was very invested in her students. So this is my new first grade teacher. I had her for about 2.5 months in North Carolina. I believe she just retired, but she was an educator for 44 years. That's dedication to your service. In Johnston County, North Carolina, Miss Vicki Temple met me every day at the door and made sure that I knew that I was loved. She also made sure that if I didn't have lunch money, she had me. She also made sure that if there were students in her classroom who were hungry during the day, we had a snack bin. She understood that feeding the body meant that she could feed our minds. And every day she met us with an I love you, and that was feeding our souls. A few years later, I had another teacher, Miss Linda Stevens, in the 7th grade. Miss Linda Stevens, an amazing educator. I just had dinner with her a couple of weeks ago. She is still an educator. She taught for 30 years, or was an administrator for 30 years in Johnston County. And then she graduated from ECU with her doctorate in May and retired in June, and then went to work for ECU and has been teaching at ECU. Tabari, how long has she been there? Like 14, 15 years at least? A while, right? She's dedicated to the profession of education. She's also dedicated to helping grow individuals at every level. In 7th grade, Miss Linda Stevens, she believed in me, and that is something that my soul needed because I did not have that before. I had a project where I was to explore the country of China. We had all gotten different note cards on our desks, and my note card was China, and she explored the country. I was supposed to explore the country of China and create a big poster board about China, and I created that poster board, and it was an amazing poster, but I was super shy, and I had never really had anybody other than my mother who really believed in me as an individual. But Miss Linda Stevens did. At the end of that project, she looked at me and she said, "What's the best thing you learned? What's the thing that you liked the most about your project?" And I said, "Man, I really liked that idea about that Great Wall of China. It is huge. Did you know that you could actually see it from space?" She said, "Yeah, I mean, I went to school. I understood that." I said, "Did you know that people died and they just pushed them in and built around it?" She said, "I know, it's amazing." She said, "I think you should go to China one day." I said, "Miss Stevens, I will never be able to do anything like that." Because I still believed that I was that kid. That kid who was just barely going to make it at that point. But Miss Stevens believed in me. And someone else believed in me too, and that person was super important. That person was my mother. My mother, who met me every single day in the morning, and she met me every single day in the afternoon, and she tucked me in every single night. And every day she worked very hard to feed my body, to feed my mind, and to feed my soul. She wanted me to grow up to have a better life, and she sacrificed for me. There were many nights where she didn't eat, and I got a fried bologna sandwich. And I knew what she was doing even at a young age because she believed in me. And these three people right here, my mother, a 33-year educator, these three educators were the educators that I remembered when I finally, on this past summer, made it to the Great Wall of China. I went with Go Global NC and a group of 35 other educators, including Mr. Freebird Mckinney, and we all walked on our first day in China across the Great Wall, not the whole thing, like a few miles. I mean, we walked a lot that day. It was just several miles that day, but we walked on the Great Wall of China, and I remember standing in that spot and thinking about how at one time in my life, I did not think I would ever make it to anything, and on that day, I was standing on top of the world, and the one person that I wanted to call was my mother. And I did. At 10:30 in the morning in Beijing and 10:30 at night in Smithfield, North Carolina, I made that connection and told her that I had made it to a place where I never thought, and I owed everything to her and the sacrifices that she made, because in her heart, she knew that it was important to grow me into the individual that I was supposed to become. And from that, I have learned as a teacher that it is my job to do that for my students, because they may not have that mother at home who is willing to sacrifice. And these are some of my students in that bottom corner that we take every year on a leadership retreat. And I am able to look around and see those students every year for the first time in some of their lives, that they are sitting around family style at a table and sharing a meal with other people, and it is unlimited. They can go back for as many times as they want and fill their stomachs, because at that camp and on that weekend, we know how important it is to feed our kids. And so what I do is I do it for my kids, but on top of that, I do it for my twin daughters, Sophie and Mia. I know that I was put on this earth to be a mother. And I am a mother to those girls, but I am also a mother to all the kids who come into my classroom. And it is so important that I reach out into my community and allow my community to know that they can be the mothers and fathers of these children too, and that it is our collective responsibility to use our voice to feed our kids, to feed their minds, to feed their bodies, and to feed their souls. And so I want to introduce you to my team of child nutrition specialists at my school. These are my girls. Their mantra, like mine and like ours today, is on every day they put child nutrition first because they know that it is important to feed the kids. They get up early and come in and they make early breakfast for kids who may be coming in to do activities before school and might not can come through the line. They make sure that we have breakfast in the classroom for some classes at a high school level because they know that there are kids who are in advanced placement classes who need to be able to eat early. They have breakfast after the bell because they know in high school there are kids who are not ready to eat at 7 o'clock in the morning or who may come to school late because it's all they can do to get their 3 brothers and sisters up in the morning because their mom is still at work. They know that it is important that at lunchtime there may be kids who need extra food, so they have a share table, and whatever they have left over will come out, and they will feed kids extra food if there is extra food left over, because it is a shame to throw food away that doesn't need to be thrown away when there are stomachs that are still hungry. They know how important it is to feed the kids at every level, and they know that my job is not possible without them, because I cannot feed the kids who are hungry without being able to feed their bellies. These are my girls, and I love them. Okay, so I want you to look back at your parallel lines. And my superintendent, Dr. Janet Mason, who is an amazing superintendent, she is the 2018 North Carolina Superintendent of the Year, and she deserves that right. She's a 14-year veteran of the classroom as a math teacher, and I can remember back in October her talking about the importance of parallel lines. And how as a superintendent, as a child, she had a teacher who challenged her idea of parallel lines, because parallel lines don't intersect on a plane, but where do they intersect? When you are looking down the line of a railroad track. When you look down the line of a railroad track, those parallel lines, when you see them at your feet, are parallel, but when you see them ahead of you, they cross. And they cross at that point ahead of you until you get to that point, where they then become parallel again, and you look up into the horizon and you can see that they are crossing again. And so I want you to think about this, and I challenge you to think about what you know is absolute. Parallel lines do not intersect until they do. That point, when they intersect, that is our goal. So look out into the future. What is our goal? Our goal is to make sure that there are no kids in North Carolina who are hungry. And we will work towards that goal until we meet it. And then we will look out into the future and we will set another goal, a goal that is greater, a goal that is bigger, a goal that is more empowering, a goal that is more inspiring to those kids that we have fed, because then it is their responsibility to give back and feed others. Because in education, education is not about filling a pail. Education is about lighting a fire. It is not about just filling their stomachs, but it is about inspiring those kids that we fill their stomachs to become greater, to become part of our army, to become part of our goal-setting team, to become part of the solution. Education is about lighting a fire, and there are fires all over the state. There are fires all over the state, and Freebird and I, when we were in Ocracoke this summer along with our team, we came up with our team's mantra, and that is to be the lighthouse. To be the lighthouse. So today I encourage you to become part of that fire that is lighting the lighthouse across the state of North Carolina.